you're watching this in the future. Hope you're doing good. I've got this little stand thing that's... One second. Okay, should be good now. Oh man, it's not one. Hang on. Okay, hold on one second. See if I just don't touch it. Okay, I think if I don't touch it, we'll be fine. Good morning. Hope you guys are doing well. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and how you're doing. And let's go and get into it. If you guys, I can't talk. If you guys have any questions about anxiety, panic attacks, depersonalization, realization, health anxiety, existential obsession, rumination, you guys know all the stuff that I help with. I can't, help you fully recover over a live stream, but I can give you some encouragement. I can answer a few questions here or there. So drop them on me. Silly, what's up? Good to see you. You're doing awesome. Who else is watching? So we got 8 people here. What's up, Sub? Good to see you. Got some regulars. What's up, Angad? Good to see you, buddy. So try to ask very specific questions if you can. Because like if you tell me if you ask me how do I overcome depersonalization, I mean, I could talk to you for 15 hours, Yeah. Okay. What's up, Crystal? What's up, Daniel? What's up, Lassa? Lassa says, I recommended my close friend to your mentorship. He bought it and told me it worked well, and he'll buy it for me. I'm sure it will. Awesome. We'd love to have you. So you said you feel like you are living in a fake world, like nothing's real. Yeah, so I mean, I can't diagnose or anything like that, but derealization makes you feel like you are living in a dream world. And it was one of the most terrifying things that I've ever experienced in my entire life, next to depersonalization, which I would say is the number one scariest thing that I've ever experienced, where you feel detached from your body. I would constantly be checking my hands, and my hands felt like they weren't my own. And I looked in the mirror, I saw a complete stranger. People felt very robotic, unreal. But anyway, derealization is whenever it feels like there's a wall of glass between you and the material world. And there's various levels of intensity of it, but in the most extreme version of it, it literally feels like you've slipped out of reality and you're living in a dream world. But some people may feel slightly connected, but there's just something off about everything. Kind of varies. But yeah, depersonalization and derealization are trauma coping mechanisms. And so trauma is a state of overwhelm in the nervous system. And depersonalization, realization are dissociative symptoms. Dissociation means to sever or separate. It's where your brain is trying to separate you from painful. I got a call. Hold on one second. 1 second. Sorry, I got some calls. But anyway, so trauma is a state of nervous system overwhelm. And depersonalization, realization is there to separate you from that overwhelm. And whenever the symptoms initially show up, people don't know what they are. I didn't know what they are. And whenever you start to feel detached from your body or everything feels like it's a dream world and you're super duper anxious, like you think you're going crazy. You think you're losing your mind. And that makes you even more stressed, you know? And so that's why education about the symptoms is super important. Learning how our body works. It's like we teach our kids, you know, how to do math and reading and writing and all this stuff is great. But why don't we teach our kids about our nervous system? Why don't we have an entire class just learning about the nervous system as well as self-regulation? You know, it's like dysregulated children turn into dysregulated adults. And so a big reason why we have so many dysregulated adults is because they never learned how to regulate as children. And the neural template by which we're going to interpret future human experiences is pretty much laid by the age of 2. It continues on until it's debated, you know, age 14, 16, or whatever. And it's not that we can't change the brain later on in life. That's neuroplasticity, right? The brain is plastic, right? It can be changed. What I'm saying is your early experiences really do shape a lot of your future experiences. And a lot of people will never go through that process of rewiring their brain, usually because they just don't know how to. So, so DPDR and more is the username. You said how to assure yourself that the world is real. That's not a good approach. The question is, why is your nervous system in a state of overwhelm? And what can you do to convey safety to your nervous system? That's the real question. That's what I do with my clients is we do things that convey safety. One of them being self-regulation, learning to feel what's happening in your body and release the tension, adrenaline, and emotion from the body, making lifestyle adjustments, right? A big thing that I do is teach people to work from a place of rest because muscling your way through is not going to work. Like a lot of people leave their body behind and they're not listening to their body and they pay for it. And they think they're getting away with it, but they're not. They think, oh, I'm living this fast lifestyle, just chug a Red Bull, just chug a Monster. Okay, maybe today I need two cups of coffee, 3 cups, 4 cups, 5 cups. I'm fine. You're not fine. And your body is building up with a lot of tension, a lot of cortisol, a lot of adrenaline, probably a lot of suppressed emotion, a lot of fatigue, and you eventually will come face to face with that. You can get away with it for a little while because technically speaking, we don't even become aware that our body is in fight or flight response until fear kicks in. So according to the neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux, fear is actually not an emotion. It's whenever we have a sense of danger and we become aware that our body is in fight or flight response. So prior to fear kicking in, there can be a lot of buildup in the body and nervous system, and we're not even consciously aware of it. It's subcortical, and that's why a lot of people think that they're fine when they're really not. There's a lot of buildup happening in the body, and this is especially relevant as it relates to complex trauma, which is the slow buildup of stress over time. A lot of people, they've got a lot of buildup in their body, but fear hasn't kicked in, so they're not even consciously aware of it. And then years go on and they think that they're fine, and then there'll be some sort of situation that happens that triggers fear, and then shortly after fear kicks in, which is where they become aware of all the buildup in the body, they hit an overwhelm point, which is a trauma state. Daniel says, can a loss of a parent lead to DPDR? So, you know, losing a loved one, especially a parent, is just unthinkable, right? And if it creates overwhelm in the nervous system, which is what a trauma state is, absolutely. Depersonalization, realization may kick in to separate you from the overwhelm, from the trauma state that you're in. But there are two factors that determine if somebody enters a trauma state. Number one, let's say in the context of a major trauma, which is a sudden state of overwhelm in the nervous system. Number one, does that person have a history of trauma? Because if they do, then the neural connections in their brain are already wired to very quickly induce the freeze response. But number two, does the person have the presence of self-regulation skills? Right? You could have two people in a car accident and one person can walk away traumatized, overwhelmed. The other person may not, because maybe one person has the ability to self-regulate and also doesn't have a history of trauma, and the other person doesn't know how to self-regulate, which is calming the body, and does have a history of trauma. And so a lot of what determines how we experience situations is based upon that individual. This is called neurodiversity. It's this understanding that we all have a unique set of neural connections in our brain based upon our own unique history. For example, since I've learned this art of self-regulation, I've had a number of situations where there's kind of like a crisis in front of me. I've actually had people have a seizure in front of me, I think 3 times in the last maybe 10 years or whatever. But everybody else is freaking out. And because I'm able to self-regulate, I'm able to basically kind of be calm and assess the situation, call 911, start setting a timer and all these things to make sure that person is okay. And we know how long it's been since the seizure from whenever the EMTs show up. Anyway, I've learned how to self-regulate, but I did not know how to do this for most of my life. I was the guy freaking out, right? And so self-regulation skills are very important because it allows us to keep the nervous system calm, right? It's the ability to keep your body calm in real time. And if you're experiencing painful situations, let's say loss of a loved one, like you mentioned, Daniel, there's going to be a lot of emotion. There's going to be a lot of just pain and stress. But if you have the ability to self-regulate, and especially if you're facing and releasing your emotions, maybe it doesn't lead to overwhelm and DPDR, right? So by the way, I started drinking this stuff called athletic greens. They talk about it on the Joe Rogan podcast all the time. It comes with this really cool cup. And I got to tell you guys, it's really, really good. I feel great. I don't eat green vegetables. I can't do it. I'm not that guy that's going to be eating green beans, and I don't like. I've got to drink my greens, man. I don't like vegetables. I never have. Living like Caleb says, do you think depersonalization, realization, and trauma responses will get more attention in the future? Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's a trauma-informed movement that's happening. It's very slow moving though, but it's happening. And I hope within the next 10 years, there will be a major shift where more and more people understand trauma. Now, what I also will say is there's kind of like a counter movement of people that are like, oh no, it's not really trauma. All these people are just exaggerating, right? It's really that they're just not really tough and they just don't have perspective, right? Like 100 years ago, our great-grandparents went through more in a day than we go through in a lifetime, and we call stuff trauma, and it's really just not trauma. I'm starting to hear that quite a bit, that it's very subjective, and I will agree. Some people label stuff as trauma that is not trauma. But there are a lot of traumatized people out there. Trauma is a state of overwhelm in the nervous system. And after COVID, my clients increased by 30%, almost overnight. And I think the lockdowns in particular, I think that caused a lot of overwhelm in the nervous system. So trauma happens whenever there is overwhelm in the nervous system. You feel trapped. You feel like you can't escape. And if you think about the lockdowns, I mean, some people were forced to stay in their house for a year. and couldn't leave, right? So think about that for a second. Think about not being able to leave your house for your. Did any of you guys go through that who are watching? See, we didn't get affected very much by the lockdowns, thankfully. But what I'm saying is, like, COVID caused a lot of people to get health anxiety and to be very stressed out, right? And I'm not saying that there wasn't a reason to be scared. We found out in the end that it was a lot less worse than we thought. But yeah, worried that you're going to get sick, that your family is going to get sick, and then of course if you were locked down, there was a lot of stress that happened during COVID, and I think that it exacerbated a lot of pre-existing issues, pre-existing stress that people had. So, Noslin says, my anxiety is so bad, I can't leave the house even before COVID. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. And I just started working with a client a couple months ago, and she actually couldn't leave her house either. And she's worked with us for 2 months, and she just sent us a message a couple weeks ago and said that she just went on a trip to Europe, and she was pretty much anxiety and DPDR free except for at the airport. And I think she said she walked, like, I forget how many thousand, 42,000 steps, or was it 420,000? I can't remember. It was a big number. And that's because she started to do things that conveyed safety to her nervous system, and she was able to get out of it. Self-regulation, co-regulation, exposure, to name a few things that she did. But anyway, there is hope and there is healing, but you can't stay in your house. You can't stay in the house. That's just going to keep you stuck. That's going to keep your brain thinking that there's a lion present. Because whenever you avoid things, your brain assumes that that thing is dangerous. Lassa says, is escapism normal with DPDR? Even when I'm at home and safe, I want to escape. Hold on one sec. My wife called me. Yeah, of course you want to escape, because let's not focus on DPDR for a second. Let's focus on you being in a trauma state, right? The freeze response. Whenever you're in the freeze response, it's designed to convey to a predator that you're dead, so it loses interest and walks away. It's a mammalian defense mechanism. It's not exclusive to humans. And whenever you're in the freeze response, your mind is going to be speaking to you and saying things like, just stay still. Just don't do anything. Don't go outside. Don't live your life. That's dangerous. Just stay put. Stay in your room, right? And you're going to want to escape. You're going to want to be frozen and escape into TikTok, escape into YouTube, escape into podcast, escape into the past, escape into the future. Yeah, that's extremely common. And that escape is really dissociation. Dissociation comes from a Latin root word that means to sever or separate. So the escape is you trying to separate from your body and from your life because it's overwhelming. Doesn't make you a bad person. Don't feel any shame. But we need to deal with what's happening in the body, and we need to deal with what's happening in your life. That's really the answer. So that way you don't need to escape. The reason why I don't need to escape into video games or social media or whatever is because I am integrated into my body. I'm calm. I feel safe. My life is good. I don't need to escape anymore. I used to have this fantasy that one day I would be able to just play video games full time. I was like, man, if I could just sit at home all day and play World of Warcraft, which, by the way, for all you World of Warcraft nerds out there, I just got advertised this thing that there's this new expansion or something with World of Warcraft where like you can mix your talents and abilities and all this stuff. It does look pretty cool. I think me and my wife may play that. I don't know what it's called. But anyway, I'll always be a gamer at heart. But what I'm saying is, I literally used to just try to escape all the time. Even my obsession with existence, it was a dissociative mechanism. A lot of people don't realize that. You think that you've got an obsession with existence, or you think that you're obsessed with your health, where you've got a lot of health anxiety. And sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes you obsessing over your health, or you obsessing over existence, or you obsessing over people's opinions of you, or obsessing over 10,000 other things is really an escape. It's a dissociative outlet. It's a way for you to not have to be in your body. Because if you're always in your head thinking about, what if I have cancer? What if I have this sickness or disease? Or, what about existence? What about consciousness and the afterlife? And, what is the material world? And why are we here? And all this stuff. You don't have to be in your body. Big J says, what are the keys to recovery? Go to my profile, and also in any of these videos that should be in the description once this posts. Watch my 5 shifts to heal from trauma, anxiety, panic, and DPDR masterclass. It shows you the 5 shifts that you need to make. So, and it's free, so you can watch it. It's 45 minutes. It'll change your life. And then there's also a button where you can click to apply to work with me and my team as well. What are your thoughts on psych meds like Prozac? So I can't give advice about medication. It's very important, very, very, very important that you talk to a doctor about that, a licensed mental health professional, because there can be side effects, there can be withdrawals. I mean, if you guys know Jordan Peterson, which I got to hear him live, by the way, I guess it's been like 4 months ago. Best talk that I've ever heard in my life. Oh my gosh, it was incredible. But anyway, I got to hear Kermit the Frog live. But he almost died because of, I think it was benzo withdrawals. And he took it because I think his wife had a cancer diagnosis, and he was taking it just to, feel better or whatever. But anyway, yeah, those meds, like, you got to talk to a doctor about that. But what I will say is, a lot of our clients are on some sort of anxiety meds or, depression meds or whatever. And we never tell them to get off of them. But a lot of times after they work with us and they learn how to self-regulate and they start to desensitize their sensory triggers and things, they end up going to their doctor and they ask them like, hey, can I get off of these? Again, we don't tell them to do that, but it's very common because they don't feel like they need them anymore. What's my educational background? So I don't have a license in mental health. I'm not a doctor. I'm really just a regular guy that tells corny jokes that are sometimes funny. But I went through these symptoms myself, and it almost destroyed my life. And by the grace of God, I was able to figure out how to heal. And I did a YouTube video in 2017, just kind of sharing some tips for recovery. And then people started to watch the videos. And eventually there was such a demand for people to work with me, needing help, that I quit my job. And it's been 6 years. And over the years, I've educated myself, just books, courses, and I also have been mentored. I'm so humbled to say, I don't know why they took time with me, but I've been able to be mentored by some of the top traumatologists and neuroscientists in the world, and they have helped me understand what really heals these symptoms, based upon research. I'm really big on research. I have some stuff that I teach that's kind of my own nuances or whatever, but ultimately, I teach based upon what's been proven to work. For sure. I'm not going to chance people's recovery with my own stuff. That's why I'm pretty baffled at, just all the acceptance and distraction stuff out there. Like, it's just not enough. especially in a complex trauma situation. But anyway, yeah, so we teach the latest neuroscience. And what I tell people is I'm like, yeah, I don't have my license in mental health. I'm not a doctor, but I can read research. Consider what I do almost like applied psychology, right? So I've looked at the research, I've seen what works, what doesn't work. I've also had the experience of working with thousands of people and just anecdotally learning what people respond to and what they don't. And I've just continued to perfect this approach over 6 years, and it's very effective, very, very effective. So anyway, yeah, so I think that there's kind of this belief that you have to have a license in mental health to help people. And my disclaimer is you should see a licensed mental health professional before considering working with me. That's my disclaimer. But unfortunately, people go to licensed mental health professionals all the time and don't get the help that they need. And that's what's very difficult. Whenever I say that disclaimer, I'm like, I have to say that. But at the same time, I know that a lot of people aren't getting the help that they need. Some people do, which is awesome. But we get people all the time. They've been through 2, 3, 4 licensed mental health professionals, and they just kind of looked at them and were like, what's depersonalization? Hold on, let me look this up. And some have had really bad experiences. But anyway, I love licensed mental health professionals, don't get me wrong, but it seems like there's a gap when it comes to trauma, depersonalization, realization, where people just aren't really getting the help that they need. And a big part of what heals trauma, depersonalization, realization, other trauma symptoms is co-regulation. And what I've found is because I've been through it, I have an ability to co-regulate people, which is me calming them down and creating hope very effectively. In fact, I can show you studies that show that 45% of healing trauma is co-regulation. And so, like, because I've been through it, people really resonate with that. It's one thing if somebody tells you that there's hope who's never been through it, but it's another thing whenever somebody has been through it and they're like, hey, you can get through this. It's really, really encouraging for people. So a lot of the reason why I'm able to help people is not because I have some fancy degree or whatever. It's because I simply relate with them. And I explain things in such a way that they know that I've been through it. And then I tell them, hey, I've beaten this and I've helped a lot of people beat this. You can beat it too. And it works. It's very effective. So a lot of people think that like method is what's going to heal people. Method is important. We need a body-based strategy. That's what the latest research shows, right? The body keeps the score. If you've heard of Bessel van der Kolk's book, whenever you go through painful experiences, they get encoded in the form of sensory triggers. So your brain takes a snapshot of all the sensory data around you and encodes that sensory experience as being associated with threat, and your brain assigns the procedure of fight or flight response or the freeze response to that sensory data if it's an overwhelming situation. And so your brain has created all these sensory triggers, and whenever you get around similar sensory data in the future, your body is going into fight, flight, freeze, and it just creates this body that's a war zone. And then people don't know how to self-regulate, which is the ability to release that buildup. They don't have interoception, which is the experience of the embodied self. So they're not even really feeling very much of it. And they learn to live in their heads, or they look to nicotine, or they look to caffeine or THC or porn or food or alcohol or drugs or all kinds of things. And these are not a reflection that they're bad people. These are reflections of people are in a lot of pain and they're trying to get back to balance, right? We're wired for homeostasis. We're wired to get back to balance. And whenever you don't know how to get back to balance through things like self-regulation and you don't have proper co-regulation, you're going to find some way. And what I tell my clients is, this is good. This is a skill set. Like, yeah, maybe you used, alcohol, or maybe you used unhealthy food, or maybe you used nicotine or whatever to get back to balance, but you still found a way. You did something that made you feel better. So you already know how to do something to make you feel better. We just need to change what that something is. Let's replace alcohol with self-regulation and social connection, all these other things that will help give you regulation and dopamine. So that way you don't need to look to that stuff. And all the time, people are like, Jordan, ever since I started working with you, I don't have to take my sleeping pill anymore. Again, we never tell people to not take any sort of meds. I want to clarify that. It's very important. But they're like, I don't have to take my anxiety meds anymore. I don't have to look to alcohol anymore. I stopped smoking. I stopped vaping. I stopped looking at porn. I stopped eating unhealthy food. All these things just naturally fell away once they learned how to get back to balance in a healthy way, right? Servant of God says, I've been using nicotine and it only made me more miserable. Yeah, so the studies as far as nicotine's effect on the nervous system are unfortunately very limited. I really do like to have as much research as possible to back up what I'm saying. So I unfortunately don't have a boatload of research to support nicotine's effect on the nervous system. But what I will tell you anecdotally, as somebody who used to smoke, not like a lot, but smoked enough to experience this, and even did vaping at one point in time, and also working with thousands of people, I have seen a very strong connection in people quitting vaping, especially, but quitting nicotine and seeing a direct effect on their nervous system. So no, I don't have a lot of studies to back up that particular, belief, but anecdotal. And I do have some studies that I could show you for sure that there's a comorbidity between nicotine usage and increased anxiety. But I will tell you anecdotally, there seems to be a very common connection. And I had this girl that I was working with, I guess it's been maybe 5 months now total. But anyway, she got off nicotine through vaping, and almost immediately she started getting glimmers of feeling normal again. So I'm telling you, man. Brooklyn says, wow, you're making me tear up. I haven't felt so hurt in so long. Thank you so much. Aw, well, I'm glad to hear that. Good. Daniel says, is microdosing psychedelics a viable way of dealing with these things? Very good question. So it's a hard question to answer simply. What I would say is that there appears to be a growing Is there something on my nose? I feel like, anyway, there appears to be a growing body of research that would support psychedelics as being a viable way to help people heal from trauma. What I would say is that if it were me, I would probably not do that for a couple reasons. Number one, 30% of my clients that I've worked with over the last 6 years came to me because a bad drug experience triggered overwhelm and depersonalization realization, typically marijuana, but not limited to that. Dimethyltryptamine, acid, mushrooms, ecstasy, you name it. But marijuana being one of the more common things that happens that causes overwhelm in the nervous system. But it can go either really good or really bad. That's my hesitancy with using psychedelics to heal trauma. A lot of people are seeing some great results with that. And hey, I'm all for people feeling better. But it can go really bad or really good. And if it goes really bad, it's like really, really bad. Like we're talking like potentially years of suffering, maybe even permanent damage. I don't know. I really don't know. As far as like using psychedelic drugs, like I don't know. But what I will tell you is it's not something that I would risk. And there are all kinds of natural ways that one can get their body out of a trauma response independent of psychedelic drugs. But I also will say, I've heard some stories of people being just so symptomatic and so just debilitated with symptoms that, that was the only thing that worked for them. And again, I'm not against people feeling better, but what I would tell you is, like, if it were me, I would try a natural approach first before I would ever consider doing that, because there's a risk of things going very bad. And then my other concern with that is the person never learned how to self-regulate. Because if the psychedelic drugs are what brought the results, is that person never going to have any more painful experiences in life? So every time that they go through a painful experience, they're just supposed to do some more psychedelics. They still need to learn how to self-regulate. So the psychedelic drugs are not actually preventing this from happening again. So anyway, it's kind of an interesting topic, but yeah, athletic greens. I've been drinking this for like the last week, and it is totally worth it. I'm not a sponsor, or they're not I'm not an affiliate for them or anything. Maybe I should be, but anyway, yeah, it's pretty good. I mix it with like some electrolytes, some flavored electrolytes, and it kind of makes it taste a little bit better. But yeah, it's really, really good. Holly says, just one from Scotland. Had DPDR chronically for 8 years. Had or has. Nobody believes me. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Just know that if people have never experienced depersonalization realization, they're not going to understand you. They're not going to get it. And you can spend all day trying to explain it to them, and they're not going to get it. And it's very frustrating too, because on the surface, you look fine. I mean, maybe if you're having like a panic attack or there's like some sort of external reaction or whatever, but you can literally be sitting there completely depersonalized or derealized, and everything feels fake and dreamlike, or you feel detached from your body, and you're kind of emulating the mannerisms of a normal conversation and social interaction, and people think, oh, well, you're fine. I'm looking at you. Everything's good. It's not like you can go to the hospital and they're like, hey, let's do the DPDR test, right? Let's see what your depersonalization realization levels are. You can't do that. I mean, you technically can get a brain scan, and if you're in a trauma state and experiencing DPDR, most likely the mohawk of self-awareness will not be lighting up. That's what Bessel van der Kolk calls it in the Body Keeps the Score book. It's like a series of brain structures that are essentially responsible for us feeling connected to our body and to the material world. And those things shut down in a trauma state, which is essentially what produces depersonalization realization. So anyway, with that being said, most people are never going to get a brain scan. It's actually very difficult to even get a referral to a neurologist if you're experiencing DPDR, because, doctors are trained to kind of observe for any clear neurological impairment, and they typically don't see it. And so people don't end up getting a brain scan. But anyway, people don't get it, and everything appears to be normal on the outside, but on the inside, people feel like death, and it's very frustrating for them. So basically what I tell people is, like, just don't even try to explain it to people, because it's just going to create stress and resistance that you've already got too much of right now. So Yahaya says, life before the DPDR feels like a long forgotten memory. Yeah, that was me too. I experienced the same exact thing. It felt like, my life was over, and I couldn't even remember what normal felt like. And that's a big complaint of my clients, right? Is they say, I don't remember what normal feels like. So how could I ever feel normal again if I don't even know what it feels like? And what I tell them is if we do things that convey safety to the nervous system long enough, eventually neuroception will turn back on, which is your brain's ability to perceive safety, and you will re-enter something called your social engagement system. This is the ventral vagal branch of the parasympathetic nervous system. And whenever your social engagement system turns back online, you feel safely embodied. You feel grounded to your body, grounded to your environment. You can easily socially engage, hence the name social engagement system. You've got full access to the prefrontal cortex, logical, critical, creative, contextual thinking, attentional awareness. You feel curious. You feel, a lot of times joy, kind of like little quirky things about your personality come back, kind of you joke around more. You've got vocal prosody, which is essentially kind of fluctuation in vocal tonality. Have you noticed that when the more frozen that you become in a trauma response, the more that you start to speak like this, and it's like, yeah, I'm just not really feeling very good, and I'm just, I just feel miserable, and I just feel overwhelmed. But whenever you're in your social engagement system, like, yeah, so like, yeah, how are you doing today? Okay, awesome, yeah. So I was going out with my friends the other day, and yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. You see, there's that. It's called vocal prosody. So anyway, whenever this part of the nervous system comes back online, you'll recognize it. It's called a glimmer. So whenever I'm working with clients, we call this a glimmer of feeling normal, of being in your social engagement system. And it's awesome. And even if people were stuck like this for years, they can still come back into their social engagement system. I was stuck in anxiety for well over a decade, suffered with trauma for 5+ years to one degree or another, DPDR constantly for 2 years, and then off and on for like 5 years total. But basically, it doesn't matter how long you've been suffering. If you do enough things to convey safety to the nervous system, self-regulation, co-regulation, exposure, cognitive restructuring, which is kind of getting the neuroscience of what's going on. Those are the 4 kind of biggest things that we teach our clients. But anyway, you can feel normal again. You really can. Even if you've forgotten what normal feels like, your ability to feel normal again is not contingent upon your ability to remember what feeling normal feels like. That's what a lot of people think. They're assuming that because they can't remember what life felt like before the symptoms, they can't remember what normal felt like, then it must mean that they're incapable of ever feeling normal again. That seems logical in the state that you're in, but you're also in a very illogical state. So you have to remember that. Hold on one second. I had to shut the door. So anyway, you're not in any state to be making these declarations over yourself. That's what I tell people all the time. I'm like, you are literally in a trauma state, the state that you would be in if a lion was eating you. Like, you are not in any state to be making these declarations over your future that you're never going to get out of this and it's permanent and you've forgotten what normal feels like, so you'll never be able to feel normal again and all this stuff. Like, you're not in any state to be making these types of declarations over yourself. So what I tell them is, let me be the one to make these declarations, because I'm in a really good state and I can see things that you're not able to see. And even though you feel hopeless, there is hope. Your mind isn't letting you see that, because that's part of a trauma state. That is the hell of trauma, is that it feels permanent, right? It feels as if it's not going to end. It feels like there's no hope. And thus, people are already feeling terrible, but then you throw in everything feeling permanent. It's like, it's one thing if you're going through something, but you know that there's an end to it, even if it's 2 years away, right? That's actually what gets people through prison is they count the days, assuming that they don't have a life sentence. Even if it's like 5 years, 10 years, they count down the days. I've actually had a client one time that went to prison for I think like 5 or 6 years. Maybe it was even longer, but anyway. And he told me that was a big thing that got him through. So it's like if you know that there's an end point, you can make it through, or it's easier to make it through. But if you feel like there's no end, if you're in a prison cell and you feel like it's a life sentence, that leads to levels of depression and just excruciating pain that is indescribable with words. And that's the type of people that I'm working with, people that literally feel like there's no hope. And I have to help them create hope, show them that there's a light in the midst of the darkness. And it's very difficult, but because I've been there, like I've talked to you about at the beginning of the live stream, that's one reason why I can create so much hope is because it's like, dude, I went through this. Like, and not only that, I've been working with people exactly in your situation for 6 years. And every single time they feel hopeless, every single time they think that they're the exception. That's like the number one thing that I hear from people. It's like, oh, everybody else can beat this, but I'm that one guy or that one girl that's got this unique situation that can't be fixed. And I'm like, I just did a recovery interview with somebody who thought that they were the exception and they still beat it. Oh yeah, and then there was this person and then this person, and literally everybody that I've ever helped beat this, they thought that they were the exception, but yet they still beat it. So what does that tell you? That tells you that it's in your mind. It's just an irrational fear. It's not real. Travis says, today is my birthday, but can't even enjoy it because of this, because of these symptoms. I'm so sorry to hear that, buddy. Happy birthday. And what I will tell you is, since I've been able to become symptom-free, it's like the years that were wasted didn't even happen. Like 1 week being symptom-free and getting to experience those precious moments, it makes it as if all the pain and suffering and missed moments didn't even happen. So that's what I would say. And again, happy birthday, buddy. So I've had a couple people ask how they can work with me. So my approach now is I'm not working with a bunch of people anymore. I did that for the first 2 or 3 years of my career. Now I'm just working with kind of a smaller handful of people that are highly committed to recovery. I like to say there's the 80-20 rule, which is 80% of people are not committed to results, 20% of people are. And so I invest a lot of my time and energy in a small handful of people. And that's kind of my approach now. So anyway, if somebody is experiencing the symptoms that we help with, and as well as is highly committed to recovery, as well as can afford it, because it's not cheap, because I'm only working with a small handful of people. I have to make a certain amount of money to be able to pay my team. I've got a 5-person team. But anyway, in the links of any of my videos, there's a link to watch my free 5-shift Steal from Trauma, Anxiety, Panic, DPDR masterclass. And then there's a button that says apply now or book a call or something. Click that, apply, and then you'll be able to book a call, assuming that you qualify, and then you can speak with me and my team to see if we can help you. And no guarantees. We got to hear your situation. There has to be certain things in place, but yeah, we do have, a lot of different options now for people to work with us. So hopefully one of those will work out for you. But no promises. Just like I want to be very like I'm not creating coaching for everybody. I'm at a different phase in my career now where I just don't have the energy anymore to do what I was doing. So I'm kind of working with a smaller handful of people now each month. So anyway, Matt says, you're the only guy online who explains what I'm going through, so thanks. Awesome. I'm glad that it encouraged you, buddy. I'm going to end this at an hour. So we got about maybe 11 more minutes. So Sub has asked a question. And by the way, just ask if I'm doing these live streams, just ask the question maybe like twice. Because if I don't answer it after 2 times, it probably means that I don't think it would help a lot of people to answer it. So don't keep asking the same question over and over again. But I will go ahead and answer this for you because I can tell it's important to you, Sub. Does eating non-vegan worsen DPDR? Here's what I will say. You know, diet does have an effect on your nervous system. There's no question. I used to not understand the impact of eating on your nervous system, but I will tell you now, it is significant. You don't have to have a perfect diet to heal from trauma and anxiety and panic and depersonalization, realization, but food is mood. Food is very important. And if you're eating, especially a lot of carbs, you might be experiencing something called reactive hypoglycemia, which is essentially where you take in a lot of carbohydrates and your blood sugars spike and then they drop really low. And whenever your blood sugars drop really low, your body triggers adrenaline to raise your blood sugars up. And so if you're eating a bunch of empty carbs and your diet is terrible and you're feeling like a lot of adrenaline, your heart's pounding, especially if you're having panic attacks and you're just constantly anxious, it could be diet related. So that is one thing that I address with my clients is I'm like, hey, how's your diet? Now, I'm not a dietitian. This isn't diet advice. This is just, my opinion, although I am, slowly kind of gaining knowledge as it relates to nutrition. But yeah, food is mood. And if you're eating a bunch of empty processed food and a bunch of, empty carbs, yeah, that definitely could be affecting your nervous system. And I used to not really understand the importance of nutrition, but yeah, it's very, very, very important. But again, don't feel like you've got to eat perfectly, like you've got to eat chicken and rice every meal, to beat this or whatever. Don't be extreme. But it's, what I tell my clients is like, listen, you don't got to be perfect to get out of this, but you need to be consistent. You need to be consistent with doing things that promote health, wellness, relaxation, well-being, and things that communicate safety to the nervous system. And your nervous system will reprogram. You don't got to be perfect, but the more you do, the better. So for example, you don't have to have a perfect diet to get rid of these symptoms, but the more healthy that your diet is, the better. You're right. Like your diet could be like a 6 out of 10. And as long as everything else is good in your life, you're going to be fine. But if you got that to an 8 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10, that would help, right? That's kind of the situation. Amber, what's up? Can you be traumatized, then be doing better, and then get re-traumatized by a similar betrayal and still struggle with getting out of it? Absolutely. Yeah. So trauma is overwhelm in the nervous system. And it sounds like you've had a pretty painful history. This isn't a diagnosis or anything like that, but complex trauma is where there's repeated stress and adversity over time. A major trauma is where there's a sudden state of overwhelm in the nervous system. It's like a lightning strike. But complex trauma is like, filling up a cup of water. And so what's probably happening is you're walking around with a pretty high level of stress in your body. And then there's these betrayals, bam, that puts you to overwhelm, and then DPDR, maybe other trauma symptoms kick in, your memory fragments, time can feel distorted, all these different trauma symptoms. And a lot of times there's anxiety symptoms too in a trauma state, unless you're in the deepest state of trauma where there is no anxiety at all. But anyway, and then you'll kind of self-regulate or just do different things, and then bloop, bloop. That's the sound of your stress reducing, I guess. Bloop, bloop. Anyway, your stress will go down and you're not in that overwhelm point. And then another betrayal happens or another stressful situation, then bam. And this is what happens with a lot of people for a lot of years whenever they come to work with me is that they're carrying around, like, this is their body, and the liquid in here, Athletic Greens, the sponsor of today's video, I'm just kidding, but the liquid in here represents stress, and they're never really self-regulating or dealing with what's happening in their body. And so they're just carrying this all around. And if you're walking around, even right here, all you got to do is have this much stress to reach an overwhelm point. That's a trauma state. And especially if you're walking around up here, all you need is this much stress to reach a trauma state. So whenever I had a bad reaction to marijuana in 2008, I was carrying around an extremely high level of stress and fatigue and unprocessed emotion because I used to suppress my emotions. And so the marijuana experience was that little bit of stress that I needed to hit that overwhelm point. And then DPDR kicked in, my memory fragmented, time felt distorted. There was also anxiety symptoms as well. I did spend a period of time where I was completely numb, though, and that's important to know. DPDR are not a symptom of anxiety, guys. Anybody who's telling you that probably means well, but it's just not accurate. I mean, there's technically no such thing as anxiety. I don't like that term. It's really fight or flight response, but there's two phases of a trauma state. In the first state of trauma, you're experiencing trauma symptoms like depersonalization, realization, time feels distorted, memory issues, maybe even emotional numbness, but you're also experiencing anxiety symptoms, traditional anxiety symptoms. But in the deepest state of trauma, fight or flight symptoms shut off completely. That would be like if the lion was carrying you to the lion's den where there's 10 other lions waiting. There's no fighting chance anymore. So if you reach a state of complete overwhelm, and I don't mean like panic, people hear overwhelm, they think I'm talking about like panic. I'm talking about in the nervous system. If you reach complete overwhelm, you will feel actually calm, but you're really just completely numb. Right? A lot of people mistake numb for calm. There's a very big difference. And the difference is, can you be present? Right? A lot of people are like, oh, I'm calm. And I'm like, can you be present? They're like, no. Yeah, because to be present is to be safely embodied. And you're numb to what's happening in your body. And you're in the deepest state of trauma where literally you're so overwhelmed that your brain doesn't think there's any fighting chance. And you're literally about to be torn apart by a lion. And so there's a lot of people that go into this state. And that's why they hear that DPDR are a symptom of anxiety. And they're like, wait a second, I'm not anxious at all. Well, it's because DPDR are not a symptom of anxiety. They're a symptom of trauma. Trauma is a state of overwhelm. And there's two states of trauma. One includes anxiety, the other doesn't. It depends on if your nervous system believes that there's a fighting chance or not. Right? You just see yourself as experiencing these symptoms, but your brain thinks that you're being eaten by a lion. And the question is, how much hope does your nervous system think there is of you escaping or not? And if you reach a state of complete and utter overwhelm in the nervous system, you will have no anxiety whatsoever, but you'll still have trauma symptoms like DPDR, DPDR, time feeling distorted, memory issues, emotional numbness, things like that. So that's important to know. That's why education is so important, guys. That's one of the first things that I do with my clients is I take them through some scientific education, some up-to-date neuroscience about what's going on, because a lot of the fear that has come in about the symptoms is because you've got misinformation. And I remember whenever I was going through symptoms, there were a lot of questions that just couldn't be answered because I didn't have the right information. And once I got the right information, I was like, oh, that's why that happens. Oh, okay, that explains that. Oh, that's why. Oh, okay. I was able to put a period to where there was a question mark. Mel says, when you start to feel a little emotion, does that mean that you're somewhat close to recovery? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know your situation, but what I would say is if you're going from numbness to feeling emotion, that's definitely a good sign for sure, because that shows that your brain is perceiving enough safety to where your emotions are feeling authorized to process again. Sometimes your body will shut down different things that are not paramount for survival whenever you're in a deep state of survival. Digestion gets suppressed, immune system gets suppressed, your mouth may start to get dry because your salivary glands stop secreting saliva. digestion gets suppressed. That's why a lot of people have stomach issues whenever they're dealing with fight, flight, freeze response. Basically, anything that's not paramount for survival will start to get put on hold. And that includes emotional processing as well. So whenever I work with clients and we start to do things that convey safety to the nervous system, especially if they were emotionally numb, their emotions will start to come back online. And I'm like, yay, this is good. Even though you may feel worse right now, now it's time to release them. Let's release them to get them out of your body, right? So, all right, guys. Hope this has encouraged you. And we're at an hour, so I do have to go. What does my schedule even look like? It's not as bad on, is it Thursdays? Yeah, Thursdays, fine. Monday through Wednesday is absolute chaos for me. I'm scheduled like 9 a.m. to like late in the day. Thursdays, I've got a little bit of a breather. So, but I still need to go though. I got a lot to do today. So hope you guys are awesome. Thanks so much for your questions. And click like if this helped you. That'll help it get in the algorithm and stuff. And whenever it posts, go in there and comment something as well, saying that it helped you or just anything like that. We got to get this word out there, guys, okay? Big J08, what's up, man? I graduated in 2008, so that's cool. We used to say, oh, wait, oh, wait. Kate Kelly Morgan, so good to see you. Thanks for being here. Brooklyn, Mel, CR7, Crystal, as always, good to see you. Michael Simmons, if you're still watching. Panic for me. Amber, Ernie, Salome, Acts 242, Lassa, Hania, Sub, Travis, Amy, anybody else who's watching, so good to see you guys. Also, Yahaya, is that how you say that? All right, guys, I'll see you soon, okay? Talk to you later.